A lot of people call this a slow burn. I like slow burns. So I like that. I like a whole lot of backstory before we get into the romance. I like a lot of development of every character before we get into the romance. And I think this book did a good job at that. Welcome to Favorite Reader, where the books come alive. Join me as we dive deep into captivating narratives, explore intricate themes, and analyze the artistry behind the text. I'll share thoughtful reviews, insightful discussions, and recommendations that will ignite your passion for reading. Whether you're looking for your next great read or want to unravel the layers of your favorite stories, you're in the right place. Let's embark on this literary journey together. Today we're reviewing A Love Song for Ricki Wilde by Tia Williams. So this book is a contemporary romance / historical fiction. The main character, Ricki Wilde, she's a woman that was named after her father, ironically, whose name is Richard Wilde. So she was Richard Wilde Jr. They were expecting a boy. But she came from this very affluent family that lived in Atlanta. And she wanted to live, like she didn't fit into the mold of her family. She was different from her sisters, different from everybody that she was around at the time, and always felt like she didn't belong. So she got drawn to move to Harlem just based on like the rich history there, the Harlem Renaissance, which we hear a lot about in this book. And she wanted to open up her own shop. So she moves there, she is putting all her effort and time into it. And then a love interest sparks, the love interest of like the century, quite literally. It was very well timed. I think by the time they brought the love interest in, we were ready for it. A lot of people call this a slow burn. I like slow burns, so I like that. I like a whole lot of backstory before we get into the romance. I like a lot of development of every character before we get into the romance. And I think this book did a good job at that. So Ezra, who is Ricki's love, I don't want to get too much away, but he is her soulmate essentially. And we go through like their time together, what that means, the good, the bad, all of that stuff. But one thing I will say about this book, while Ricki and Ezra are very likable, like Ricki was very relatable. You can kind of see yourself in her where you don't really fit the mold. You want to do what you want to do. You have talents that people don't understand. You're awkward at times. You feel like, it's like socially awkward in some situations. And she was like very just who she was, like comfortable in her skin, but at the same time could be kind of unsure. So I don't know, she was very relatable. And you got Ezra, who's very confident in a lot of ways. So they were both really likable main characters. But Tia did a good job at developing the supporting characters too. So you had Tuesday, who was Ricki's best friend. Very well developed. You kind of build a relationship with her as it goes along. Throughout the whole book, you can see her growth, her develop, the relationships that she have developed. So that was cool. She was very necessary to the story and to Ricki's development too, I believe. Then you have the other main supporting character, who is Miss Della, who is like your grandma. Like my grandma, if my grandma was more liberated. My grandma, if my grandma was more like freedom minded, or I don't know, like not as close. If my grandma was open minded, that would be Miss Della. She was very much like just, your like fairy godmother almost. She was very necessary all the way through the book, just like Tuesday. They did a really good job, or Tia Williams did a really good job at not dropping characters off, because one of my biggest pet peeves is bringing in a character and we don't get to see them through. And that is not what you get in this book. You get to see Tuesday through. You get to see Miss Della through. You get to know them beyond their relation to Ricki and Ezra. So that was cool to see. I really did appreciate that. I will say there was a lot of like history in this book about the Harlem Renaissance. This book was written very poetically, and I don't know if that's like the nature of contemporary romances, because I don't really read contemporary romances, but it's something that I noticed right off the bat. Like the words are very poetic. It's like reading music almost, which is ironic that I said that. If you read it, you'll know what I mean. But it's very much like, like you're Prince Charming. And then I look over at my husband while I'm reading it, and I'm like, yes, you're my person. So good. It's such a feel-good book. Let me get into the one thing that I didn't really like. I wasn't a big fan of the ending. Not because of what happened, but because there was a lot of unanswered questions for me. I just feel like, even like with the resolution of the book, I wanted to know how. Like, okay, I get what happened and what the implication of that was, but like how did this translate to that? How? Like, what are the details? Obviously I can conjure up something myself, but what are the actual details? There was a few missing pieces for me there, and that's probably why I wouldn't give it a 5-star rating. I would probably give it a 4 out of 5. But it was beautiful. Like, it was really reading a love story. So a love song for Ricki Wilde was like perfectly named, because that's what it was. You got to have great character development. You got to listen to, I got to listen to a lot of music related to some of the times that they were mentioning. So when they mentioned Stevie Wonder, some of his songs and albums, I was going back to listen to that. When they mentioned some of the music that was influenced during some of the characters here and there, I was going back and listening to that. I was looking up buildings and brownstones in the neighborhood at the time during the Renaissance. So it's pretty cool to see that. Again, and not just the ending. There's a few things in between that I feel like I still have some unanswered questions on, but overall, it's a really good book. It's not a short read, but I read it quickly because it was so like, it was a feel-good book. It was like so lovey-dovey. I don't know. And again, I don't really read contemporary romances. I read it because I kept seeing it being recommended. And she has other books. So I was told that I should probably read 7 Days of June first, but I got this one first, and I'm not disappointed at all. If you've read it, let me know what you think. Will you read it if you haven't read it? Have you read Tia Williams' other books? Let me know. Okay, y'all, thanks for tuning in.